All right, Gary, there you are. How are you, sir?
Good, Kevin. What's going on?
Oh, just about we're just talking everything. What's not going on? We were talking about velocity a minute ago. And
Yeah,
sometimes you think when you thought you've reached peak velocity, or maybe the last company you thought you had reached peak velocity, you're starting to see even more velocity. I don't know if that's a sign of the times or what to attribute it to, but you guys are certainly making some waves for sure.
yeah. Like I said, every time in my career I thought, well, this is as fast as things can go. I kind of laughed at myself, 6 months later. Um, the challenges keep coming, and the
Mm.
answers have to follow suit. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, we've gotten some great traction, and I think the reason is that we're trying to solve a problem instead of just trying to put a product out. I
Mhm.
think that's important. I mean,
Yeah.
we started off asking ourselves, and this is something that I think a lot of people have the opportunity to do, especially if you've been kind of around for a while.
Mhm.
Not that I have been, but I remember a day when there weren't even PCs being used. I remember when we didn't even have your own monitor. We had one monitor, one console we all had to sign up for, things like that.
Mhm.
But anyhow, going from that to the problems of today, you just got to kind of embrace the technology and the velocity and the way things are put together. And I think we're right on track to help out on that external attack space.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get into it because I've been following you guys, and obviously having a background in the space, and all
Yeah,
things you talk about, attack services and everything you guys are doing to mitigate a lot of these challenges moving forward. I'm fascinated by it, but do want to take a giant step back. 'Cause I'm always fans of veterans that are on the podcast. So early days, you went down the Marine Corps path. Is that
I
right?
did. I
Yeah.
did. You know what? All my friends were going to college. It was not at all interesting to me at that point. I grew up on a farm in Missouri. It seemed like everything that was something was somewhere else in my mind. And so, I was looking for something I could burn some energy and see the world. And the Marine Corps provided both of those real quick. Uh, it did like kind of change, you change my trajectory overall because I really kind of realized what I could be and decided that, college was for me. And
Yeah.
I think I probably did that 10 minutes into boot camp thinking, well, you know what? I guess I will go to college. But I had a great time and I did
Yeah.
get to burn a lot of energy and I got to see a lot of the world. So, and I, was really ready for college after that. Um,
So all
you know,
of 10 minutes in, huh?
maybe 10 minutes. I was thinking, I think maybe that college track might be for me after all. But
Yeah.
no, I spent 4 years in and had a fantastic time. Learned a lot about myself and a lot about the world. And as I said back then, technology was really kind of getting hold in the business world.
Mhm.
And so, it seemed like a good track for me and I could never look back.
Yeah. So when you got out and kind of went down that college path, what were you thinking? You've been exposed to so many different things, probably in the Marine Corps, but what were you thinking? Like, what was going to be the next pursuit? What were you going to study, and then ultimately, what did you want to be at that point?
Yeah. This is back a few years ago. So technology, they didn't really have a computer science degree. I was a math guy. And so got my degree in math, went on to grad school, and really wanted to focus on, again, back then you kind of needed to be a math person to be, it wasn't unusual to have to look at ASCII or find yourself doing an assembler subroutine or something like that. So took a couple computer courses. They didn't really have that degree, but my first job was actually out of college. Was with Phillips Petroleum, and I was doing statistical analysis with Cray Fortran. So we were using Fortran and a lot of the math. But again, a lot of computing back then, was math. And today,
Mhm.
of course, they've got these fantastic degrees that give you these broad, kind of prospects or aspects of what computing's all about. So, yeah, I was interested in computing. We didn't. We had a couple computer courses, and they were only on mainframes and sort of asynchronous, submitting your jobs and stuff, and nothing like today. Nothing like today for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I noticed a couple stops at we'll get to a couple of fascinating, I guess, commercial organizations that you worked with. I think early on there was Bank of America was one of them. Is that right?
Yeah. I worked at the Advanced Technology Group. This is back in the consolidation days when we were doing lots of mergers, and so we were taking not only we had to look for, and then once you found them, take these banks and bring them together. And I really learned the power of synergy and velocity. You couldn't really wait for things to naturally happen, and kind of found the adage of the fact that culture eats strategy. And I kind of ran into that for the first time in banking when we were trying to bring two banks together that had complete different cultures, and how rough that is. How in fact you can, no matter how good your strategy is, you can fail pretty hard. And we see some of that today too, where a new culture comes in and the company needs to change, and it's almost impossible, and without kind of like draconian means. And the banking industry was famous for that back then. This is back in the 90s when I started off with a bank that became Nations Bank, which became Bank of America. And so we were doing their very first satellite communication from their my team was working on using like the Hughes networking for satellite communication at the individual branches. And that was amazing stuff. I mean, that was cutting edge. And because you didn't have cables and cable companies, you pulled back then, probably not even a T1, if you could even afford it. And so we decided to use satellite dishes, and it was pretty fun. I mean, and we were, also working on that kind of where you're trying to take two banks. Not only do you have a cultural issue, but you also have just a contextual issue where they're storing something in one format and you've got another format, and trying to find a common language between those two. And I was an operating system guy at that point, and we had to write our own languages. We wrote a couple different languages to sort of assimilate data from the one bank into another bank. And it's kind of funny because today, if you look at what we're doing today, going out and getting information from these disparate areas, be it deep, dark, or surface, and trying to bring that data together. Whereas before in the past, we had to use sort of a brute force method. Today, we got these amazing engines, both on the AI and the ML side, that make it all possible. I mean, RiskProfiler's got this ability to assimilate information and make it contextually relevant. And that's all because of these billion-dollar AI engines that exist today. We're more modelers than we are AI coders. But the availability of that is just unbelievable, what it does for us to bring data in from multiple different surfaces. And back in the day, you had to literally look at the individual column and try to figure out what it fit into, if you were lucky. And for the most part, you weren't. So I wrote a couple languages in there to let them do that. So it was kind of cool. It was cool. It was good from a modeling perspective, kind of similar to what I was doing at Phillips Petroleum.
Take me back to those. I remember it's probably early 2000s where T1s became affordable, right? Mainstream and affordable. Maybe 2003, 2004, and you'd speak with peers or others and say, yeah, we just got a T1 and now we're flying, right? And that was like the coveted, you got a T1 in the closet and and 24 ports, and that was pretty wild times. And to see the acceleration, a lot of this is we've been talking about, right? It's just acceleration of it's Moore's law. It just acceleration in general, right? It's the speed at which this stuff is moving, and we'll get into the speed at which you guys have to move to keep up with it. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating, really fascinating.
Yeah, I think it not only is it super fascinating that it's happening, but really it's enabled by our ability to use it, right? Because if we couldn't keep up with it, it wouldn't matter, or it wouldn't actually exist. So you think about, like, we're doing a lot of work with ChatGPT and these other newfound ways of using the AI that kind of existed already, in taking that information and using the tools that are available to make it more useful. And it is for us, because one of the big challenges today is learning from other people's mistakes, right? I mean, that's really what you want to do. I mean, mistakes are so valuable, but they're so hard to reveal. And you hear about the government trying to get companies that have had a breach to reveal that breach, and it usually goes through a legal filter, and then it comes out in a certain sanitary kind of clinical way. But the thing that is most helpful is be able to say, okay, and we used to have these groups. We would get together, me and other CIOs, and we would, once a quarter, we get together, myself, a guy from Chico's, and a couple other folks in retail, and we'd talk about it. And really all we did was talk about what didn't work. And can't tell you how much we benefited from having that little community to do that. And even today, with the different groups, such as Channel Program, but also the technology itself allows us to contextualize the information, but also kind of sort of a feel for what does and doesn't work. So today, we, like many other companies, we find our remediation advice all from a couple locations, and most people do, but we're actually going to are using ChatGPT kind of connections to be able to take the problem and actually make it contextual to your problem and other folks' problems at the same time, and present it to you in a way that's actionable, right? I mean, it's really the kind of a cool thing. And I think, I've kind of mixed up a couple things here in this. One is the technology allowing us to make the information more meaningful and more impactful. And the latest thing in that velocity has been, the chat GPTs and the AIs that are available that make things make sense to you, the human, because ultimately that's where it matters. So, and really on the community side as well, it's kind of making sense out of the internet.
Yeah.
Just an open bar where you put what you think in.
It's pretty wild. So you ever, you mentioned your peers. You do meetups with your peers and talk about what didn't happen. You mentioned that was kind of in the retail space, and I think fascinating again, kind of this your background going from the military to petroleum to banking, and then in retail with Joseph A. Banks, right? Is that
yeah.
You ever, as you're building out these technologies, you ever you say, damn, it would have been good if I had something like this back in the day? I mean, is that part of kind of the mentality or thought process, how you're trying to solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, Kevin, every day I say, especially in retail, because retail's hard, and I love retail because everything is against you. Everything is against you, and if you can survive in retail, you can really survive anywhere. So yeah, I do. I mean, I look back all the time and think about the mistakes that I made and got lucky, right? That's a big part of being successful. And especially back in the past, where security wasn't as well thought out. But I think about that. And I also think about, how do we not fall victim to just our area of knowledge, right? Just those guys. There's three of us founders. So, well, we spend a lot of time in communities. Channel program's a good example. We learn a ton from channel program. I mean, about who our customer is and what they are and aren't thinking, and how they feel about various programs. And you can see that in the reviews and things such as that. And having that community, it's not something we've had in the past. It was always you had a problem. You did the turtle defense, right? You pulled in your hands and legs and put your heart out of your shell on, and hope the problem went away.
Yeah.
So today it's a little bit easier to get that information, but it's in a lot of places. And since that data is in a lot of places, that's why I keep saying the chat GPTs really help in bringing that into your knowledge, and communities too, such
Absolutely.
as channel program.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the kind of the nod, but so as you transition away from Joseph A. Banks, I mean, let's kind of get into the origin of RiskProfiler and how it came together. Because again, you guys are moving fast, and you guys are, and you're at the front edge. You're in the front edge of security, and as especially for the last couple of years, security has just become, there's no boundaries with security anymore. But what was the thought process in starting the company in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple of things that really came into play. That it was an alignment of the stars between myself, Chirag Arora, and Setu Parimi. Setu being a cloud, just one of those special cloud people who understand it and has worked in it as a security professional. Chirag as a CISO, and myself as a CIO, kind of looking at it from a risk management perspective, and us not only coming together, but also, I mean, honestly, the availability of the technology to the technology we're using today is new stuff. I mean, 10 years ago, RiskProfiler couldn't have existed because we wouldn't have the AI backbones, and we wouldn't have the technology that we can participate in, model against, to provide the solution. So, coming out of retail, and I think this is a challenge, right? This is a challenge for all of us folks who've maybe not just all of us who've been around forever, but when you're in an industry, and I say you spend a lot of time in an industry, as I have, you see the gaps, right? You see the weaknesses, and you see what you do well, and you see what you don't do well. And I've got several friends who are like, "What are you doing? Starting companies?" And I think I'm going to encourage everyone who's ever worked anywhere for any amount of time to understand and become part of something like a risk profiler, right? Because those gaps and those things that you knew you weren't doing well, you have a unique kind of perspective that you can bring to the problem itself. And it's just sort of an incremental thing that you can go up. Retail showed me sort of the real challenges, the real challenges, because Chirag was with me in retail, of protecting a company, protecting a growing company, because we were just exploding from a growth perspective in retail. And so, all three of us have background, and we have the abilities in bringing that all forward to solve a problem. And that problem is that, you don't go from point A to point B magically. There's a path. You don't go from your four walls into the cloud, without stopping in the middle. There's a lot in between there. And that a lot in between there, not just the cloud, but just your data. I was reading where 80% of all data breached is outside of your four walls. And I was thinking, we were thinking, there's this gap. And there's Chirag as a CISO, kind of that outside of your four walls was like looking at the sun, right? You knew it's up there, but you never want to look directly at it because it'll burn your eyes. Right. So this external risk thing was there. We all knew it was there. We all knew it was dangerous, but it was really the purview of the bad guys. We really didn't have the ability to step into that area. And only with the technology we have today can we do that. Not only can we step into that outside your four walls, make sure your data is going from your four walls to whatever the other location is, be it the cloud or one of your vendors or one of your subsidiaries or a bank or anything like that, that we can see that gap. And so I think there's a lot of good straight cloud technology, Wiz and some other folks that are in the native clouds themselves from a security perspective. But this gap was the external risk. And that's from its conception, we knew two things. We knew that there was a problem there that needed to be fixed. And the other thing we knew was that we wanted to do it at the multi-tenant, at the MSP level. I'm a huge fan of communities, because communities promote strength. And the MSP worlds themselves create this strength that, again, it's a one-to-many solution. As the cloud are strong because they've consolidated all of this technology and software. The same thing on the MSP side. I've been a customer of many MSPs in my career. And so we knew that was the place where we could go the farthest in solving this problem. So when we created RiskProfiler, first we wanted to give visibility into an area that just didn't have visibility. And then we wanted to do it from a go-to-market at the MSPs, with the MSPs. And that's been our trajectory, and it's gone super well. Couldn't be happier.
Well, Elizabeth, appreciated your analogy there. So there you go. Good analogy, Elizabeth Perry.
Hey.
Yeah, I have to imagine that it would have really want to drill into, and I'm glad you kind of set the stage for this, because I'm again, I try not to project in these or assume too much, but I have to imagine being at Joseph A. Banks, the time you were there, you saw this transition from, just straight, in person, on the street retail to this hybrid world, right? With online shopping. And then you probably had to deal with a ton of supply chain integration, external systems, or you're probably, again, I'm projecting, but you're thinking about, third party risk and your suppliers. And so, I imagine, on one hand, it was probably ridiculously challenging, but then also ridiculously exciting. And I'm maybe seeing, some of the rationale of why you guys went down this path, maybe based on a lot of that experience in the retail industry.
Yeah. Look, Kevin, like I said, in retail's tough. I mean, it is tough, and it from an evolutionary perspective, it is gone through these evolutionary leaps today with Amazon and trying to figure out how to Amazon, and someday maybe we'll figure that out. But back with Joseph A. Bank, we were a small little retailer that had 90 stores. I got hired as their CIO through an acquaintance, and about a year into that, after we had gone from a small retailer, and my CEO walks in and he says, "We're going to become $1 billion company. Write it down right now, because we're going to be $1 billion company." And we're thinking, like, I had just gone through 3 months of we needed a server. We were using Novell back then, and we needed a new server, but we couldn't afford one. So one month we bought the hard drive and memory, because that's all we could afford. The next month we bought the carcass for it, and then the next month we bought the motherboard, and on the fourth month we had a server. That's how broke we were. Wow. To him saying, "We're going to be $1 billion company." Wow. And something happened kind of weird there. Suddenly our board of directors decided, look, the path for us to become $1 billion company is technology. Now, these are a bunch of folks that were admirals. That all of my board were former military, and you can imagine the one Marine in the room with a bunch of admirals, how well I was treated. In fact, the one thing they used to do to me, it was so bad that I would get up and I had to learn how to talk to a board, right? It's not just talking; it's different. And people who think, well, you put your CISO on the board, it's easy to do that, but you want them to be effective, right? You want it to make a difference, or else they shouldn't be on the board, right? So I would go into these board meetings, and I would get the last slide of the deck right before they had to go pitch their airplanes home. And I get one slide, and I would just suffer over that one slide. How can I make a difference? I'd get up and I'd flap my arms around and I would preach the gospel and fire and brimstone. And then one of them would call me Spock. So if I really lost them, they'd be like, "Oh, you're just trying to be Spock. Fine, just go take care of it." And I'd be like, "Oh my gosh." So this day, in the back of my mind, I hear this kind of whisper when I'm preaching that I'm just being Spock. And their point was that I wasn't being effective. And so they promoted me. They said, "Okay, Mr. CIO, you're now a COO, and you're going to have your own CIO, and you're going to grow this company." And I remember my CEO telling me two things. One is, "You're now in charge of all the stores." And I went from being this technology guy who just, kind of being Superman at night, because that's when in technology, that's when you're really super. That's when you save the world, is at night.
Right. Yep.
Usually.
Yep.
To literally staying up all night. And I walk into my CEO's office. He says, "Listen, you're now in charge of the stores and distribution and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Don't F it up." And I'm standing there thinking, really? I'm thinking, I've never been in charge of a store, and what they were doing at that time was trying to build an old legacy company into a bigger company. And they knew technology was going to be the path for this. Again, I'm the guy just a couple months earlier who was trying to put together a server, and it took me 3 months to afford it, whatever the dollars were.
Yeah.
And so it was, first and foremost, we had to expose all of our inventory, because in the old school retail, you had about 90% of your inventory in warehouse and 10% in your stores, normal ratio. But that meant the stores only got to see 10% of our inventory, and we needed to expose that. And we didn't have a .com. I got put in charge of all of that, but we still didn't have a .com. We had it was basically, you would put the order in on the website, and then somebody on the back end in our catalog division, because we did 800,000, I was in charge of that too, 800,000 catalogs. They would just key it in to the order fulfillment, and it would go to the thing. So first and foremost, we had to expose 100% of our inventory to our customers. We needed a better distribution center. We did that. I built 2 distribution centers, me and my team did. Wow. But the story isn't about me. The story is about, this is a retailer that wanted to grow, and there was really only one path, and that was technology. And we did. I mean, when we sold it in 2014, our margins were the indie of the industry. It's funny, because a lot of my modeling background went directly into our ability to do high-low retail, and compete against, every dollar we got, we took from somebody else. And so to do that, you had to be super smart about your margin management. So we went from 90 stores to 640 stores under my watch, and then ultimately sold the company for about 1.8 billion in 2014.
So he was right. Going to be $1 billion company, and then some.
Couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
We had, I get this story, this cautionary story. We were, you can imagine, it's not like I had a big staff and a bunch of people doing a lot of things. It was just a few people doing a tremendous amount of things.
Right.
And we had a catalog division, and in it we would hire summer interns every summer, and we would bring them in, and we would literally give them access to the catalog area. And then they had the ability to get into the cataloging system, which is where you could see credit cards. And people would actually call in from a catalog and give you their credit card number and things such as that. We had a guy, I was at a party in Manhattan with a bunch of vendors, and our POS provider guy came up to me, said, "Hey, I heard you guys lost your keys, your encryption keys." We used to do our own processing. We'd bring credit card transaction in, run it through our own fraud engine, and then we would push it out to the bank in an asynchronous 2-phase kind of thing. And I was like, "Yeah, that's not funny. Yeah, you're real funny," and kind of walked away. And I went over in the corner and I called my CISO, a guy named Chirag Arora. And I was like, "Did we lose our encryption keys?" He's like, no, dummy, you don't lose them. It's not like we left them on the table. I mean, how would we lose our encryption keys? And so I went back to this guy and it's like, look, I'm not sure what you're talking about. He goes, no, he goes, we got a call from your POS support group and they said that they had lost the keys and they needed replacement. For some reason, they were storing our encryption keys. The provider was. And I was like, well, that's not right. Short story long, come to find out one of our summer interns had made a project that he and his professor were going to publish to see how many credentials they could get from the inside of our company. And because he had a caller ID that said Joseph A. Bank, every single vendor he called and asked for either root or any kind of credentials like admin credentials, gave him credentials. Every single one of them, all because of a caller ID.
Wow.
And he had collected, we found him, we brought him in, interviewed him. He admitted it immediately. He said who his professor was, and he had taken all this stuff and put it on a Gmail account, taken a bunch of documentation out of our company. Short story long, we had gotten lucky because it wasn't, none of that data that we could find had been really released. But we had to, I mean, something as simple as that, we just put in a 2-factor. We got rid of our caller ID. Our summer interns no longer had access really to much other than the copy machine. And then, which was, bad for them because they didn't get this exposure. But, and then, we called the FBI and the FBI took it from there. So,
wow.
I think trying to grow is good. Trying to get to that big number is good, but you really have to have some clarity as to what's going on from a security perspective. And we were disregarding that because we were at the price of security, we were trying to grow. And we kind of stopped the presses there, stepped back and retooled really everything, retooled, everything from our head ends to our fraud processing to moving that all off of our plate and things such as that.
So you guys are, again, like as I mentioned, on the front end, and you're looking at, that's just one example of a attack surface area, and that's from within, right? And I'd argue most companies are still exposed or vulnerable to that not that specific style. Hopefully most have gotten a little bit more sophisticated, but yeah, the insider threat is pretty significant. But same thing goes externally, right? I mean, it's where you guys start with this concept of looking at your surface area, your attack vectors, your surface, in volume. Kind of walk us through the value proposition for an MSP, because again, I've seen you guys evolve quite significantly, especially over the last year. But I guess what's kind of the message to the MSPs, since you guys are you were built with multi-tenancy and the MSP community in mind?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. In an MSP, your customers can only be as secure as you are, right? I mean, if you're not secure, your customers can't be secure. And when you look at what we're doing on the external risk perspective, there's been this sort of decomposition of the company, right? And decomposition of assets and things like that. And it's more than just the cloud. I mean, it's far more than that. You've got vendors today that are taking pieces of your company that in the past would have been unthinkable. You would never have thought that you would let somebody else have access to that or process that or anything like that. So it's, in order to be secure, kind of everything has to be secure, and you can't be just a hard outer shell. You also have to be secure outside of that. So a big part of our growth has been our first customer for RiskProfiler was an MSP, and we were positive, we were 100% ready to go out and make a difference. And we spent about 6 months recovering from that, making sure, this was 2 years ago. making sure that we had kind of filled up some of the gaps that we discovered, and really use cases we never dreamt of. And so I think, the big thing for us is making sure that you're not solving a piece of the problem, because if you solve a piece of the problem in cybersecurity, you haven't solved the problem. You've only kind of gone through the motions. In fact, it's almost, I'm not, this is going to maybe sound negative, but it's not my intentions to be so. But when you do a pen test, it's great. It's awesome. You really get, a leg up on where your vulnerabilities are. But the problem with that is that time goes on, the river continues to flow, and a day later, who knows? I mean, technology is just that river, and you never see the same river twice. So the idea that you're just doing snapshots instead of a continuous view of what's going on outside of your protected inner shell, which we are. We've got very good technology inside of the four walls, and what was needed was this external piece. And so when we think of looking at that problem, you've got to go from not just doing a security score where you're saying, okay, you've got a score for, you got an A, and that A is based on your cyber risk. But it also excludes things like your cloud, or things such as brand, things such as your data that's, finding your data in the dark web, or attack path analysis and things such as that. And so, although the insurance companies are becoming bigger and bigger players for us, for all of us, right? So those grades, the insurance companies like these grades, and it's something, but the idea that you've only got one sliver is just not enough. So for us, there's really these 5 pillars that we've built for RiskProfiler, and they've evolved over time. And that is everything, going from having the cyber risk, understanding your assets, what ports are open, have you been doing your CVEs, are you mainly, how's your web presence, are you how are you staying current with your site information and stuff such as that. Then over to brand. Brand is a big deal. We've done some real cool work with ML around how do we find your brand, your logo? How do we find it on the app stores? Because you can't just be looking on the surface web. Who's pretending to be you? We had a customer that the first time we ran RiskProfiler, we found 180 pages of typo squats. How do you react to the typo squats? Getting rid of those typo squats as soon as possible. First, making them inert, and then getting rid of them as quickly as possible. So you have to have that brand, including typo squat. Then you also have to have the intelligence base on any of the information, such as your email addresses, kind of the have I been pawned kind of approach. Where is your information being found? You have to have a cloud presence. And if you don't have that ability, if your tool doesn't have the ability to go to the cloud, to and from the cloud, not just go ask some API at some cloud, how am I doing? If you can't go into and out of the cloud, which is unbelievably pivotal today, you're not secure. If you don't have all of those, if you look at the whole Venn diagram of the external space, you really have to have all of it. And today, again, amazing technology, attack path analysis. You can't just look at your problem as a bunch of dots on a map. You've got to be able to connect those lines and understand that these two mediums equal a severe high, or this 2 lows and a medium strung together are like 5-alarm fire, and you better react, because time is important, right? I mean, time and budget. And budget's a big deal. You can't, and it's something that I learned the hard way as a CIO, is that you put your budget together and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to spend. I'm going to have a little bit of cushion out here. And then your network guy walks in and says, we got this problem, and you're out of money. And so then you've got to start saying, okay, what can we do in this list of vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
What can we do in the time we have? So yeah, we're when you're looking at external risk, don't limit yourself to one of those things. If your solution isn't taking on the external problem, you'll never be secure.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine that's another thing as you guys are building this with, having that firsthand experience of having limited budget and having to reprioritize, and at that point, you're probably, with what you guys accomplished with this platform, it's probably even 2 years ago, 4, 5, 6 different tools, disparate tools that, an MSP or even enterprise would be using. And so I imagine that kind of, the way you guys have built it, and to kind of eliminate that space between, these different disparate, approaches to security is probably pretty fundamental to how you guys, in fact, built the platform.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from experience in the GRC world, as well as experience with the MSPs themselves. The idea that you can't offer really part of a solution, or an MSSP specifically. You've got to attack those problems. And using multiple tools, is expensive, but it's problematic to come up with that attack path when you have one tool that says this and another tool, and they are both generating weird false positives. What do you do with that? How do you map that out? How do you discover what that risk is? And I think probably, one of the most recent additions we've made to RiskProfiler is attack path analysis. And that's powerful. It's huge. Our customers are loving that, because it's not only do you have the top right quadrant of we've got to get this done, but you also have this graphical ability to say, whoa, what's going on here? Why is this not secure? And as well as kind of knowing what is and isn't in scope, right, for your standard, be it PCI or whatever. So we also have a layer, because I'm a standards guy. I love standards. We were able to overlay all of this on top of whatever your standard happens to be, and I think it's a requirement from any technology today. Cyber technology is you have to be able to look at it through the lens of the customer, right? I love NIST. Of course, everybody loves NIST. But if you're a retailer and you're trying to do business and grow and not get swallowed up, you don't have time to incorporate standards other than those that your auditors require, right? So you may have Sarbanes, you may have a SOC 2 Type 2 or a SOC of some sort, but our PCI is really what your standard is. You can't talk to them through NIST if they're just a PCI shop. I don't want to say just, but
right.
So I think all of these tools have to be able to talk in the grammar and through the lenses of the given standard that industry requires. And I know from a retail perspective, when I would have somebody come in and talk about a new standard, I'm thinking, are you crazy? I don't have time to put in a new standard. What's wrong with PCI, or what's wrong with Sarbanes? And maybe it caused us to extend PCI a little bit and extend Sarbanes a little bit, but we were very reluctant to even think of things outside of those standards.
Yeah. I mean, argument, against it. I mean, why would you focus on all these disparate, standards when, you're bound by, one or two specific, right?
Yeah.
And you're spending all of your time, just keeping up with that. Right.
Right.
And then you're trying to add in that additional complexity, but to your point though, for the MSP, they're dealing with financial, they're dealing with healthcare, legal, and again, it's this where this acceleration over the last probably 3 years, 4 years, but more specifically the last 2 years with the compliance frameworks, becoming front and center, right? And I think to your point, a lot of vendors look at it as a nice to have, but it was like security wasn't built into their product early on, right? Where you guys have taken that approach to build to these, give the choice to the MSP, because it's going to help them better serve their customer. It's going to give them broader reach to their customer base.
Yeah, and you're also liable to be held to a couple different standards too, right? And you want to be able to switch between them, be it FFIEC, be it ISO, be it PCI, be it HIPAA. And so being able to kind of switch between them, take the same results and look at it through this lens and then this lens and then this lens. A friend of mine was the CISO for Under Armour for a while. And he was telling me he wanted to create it. He didn't want to use any of those standards. He wanted to use his own standard. And I was like, are you crazy? What are you going to do? I mean, he's certainly smart enough to create a standard, but it's better for everyone, if you can look at your problem through this industry standard. And if the industry standard is not good enough, you're in the industry, participate and change it.
Yeah.
I think
it's just, I love the fact that, you're referencing all these great Maryland companies, by the way. So Maryland-based companies.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, I mean, it's that would be a little challenging, right? Create your own apparel standard versus just going with PCI or something. I don't know. Yeah.
And those guys got sued by HIPAA. I mean, through HIPAA, right? I mean, ultimately, that's what these standards. That's the ultimate hammer, right? Is that someone can use them against you if you're not compliant.
Yeah.
And they Under Armour got hit with a HIPAA suit because some broadcaster had broadcasted something that, or I don't remember, it was a few years ago, but I'm a standards guy, and you'll see all of that inside of our product, as well as another thing that we're again, this is my CIO experience, is you kind of live through alerts, right? I mean, today it's just so much going on, and you try to set alerts that are meaningful. It doesn't mean you don't go back and look at the detail, but you have to have alerts. And I learned that really through back in the Target. You remember the Target breach? These guys, these guys had a syslog. These guys had a syslog. I don't remember the exact details, the exact numbers, but they had like 66,000 entries that said, "Hey, I've been breached." All of their POSs had a virus on them that came from their HVAC system. Which, by the way, we had the same HVAC, but we had divided our LAN with different subnets. And we never allowed the POS transaction to be on the same layer as anything else. And so our HVAC system didn't go down onto our POSs. There's no path to that. But anyhow, these guys, Target had 66,000 entries. They had a piece of software that would have absolutely deleted those viruses, but somebody had put it on audit mode. So they spent all the money on the technology. Somebody puts this technology in. I'm not going to mention any of the names, but the technology could have gotten rid of all of those viruses, and they could have saved $1 billion for this breach. But in fact, there were no alerts. Like if the CIO, if she had known that it was in audit mode, she would have been like, "Look, are you crazy? Turn that thing on." Or if she had known that there were 66,000 entries that somebody decided that were the same on all the POSs that somebody had decided were false positives, which is the bane of the industry, but something else we spend a lot of time on, she would have acted on it. So alerts are important. And inside of our tool, if you've got a threshold, if you've got a vendor, and this is something we use a lot, after we've scanned your vendors and then we rescan your vendors, if they've changed in a downward way, you can set the parameter. Let's say if this vendor, if their grade drops 10%, send me an email, send me a text. I want to know. I don't want this technology to know. I want to know. And that's what I mean by alerts. If the target management, if the CEO or the CIO or whomever else lost their jobs had actually been told, "Hey, you've got a virus on 100% of your POSs," they had no idea. They had no idea this was going on. So alerts a big deal to me. Obviously, I think a lot of that's kind of drugged from my retail past, but your system needs to tell you that there's something wrong, and you need to be able to configure that regardless of what it is. And that's true from a multi-tenant as well as an enterprise, both. You need to know if this customer's vendor has dropped 10 points, you need to jump on that and react to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you guys mentioned you guys are moving fast. I mean, if you project it out the next 2 years, what do you guys look like? What's kind of on the horizon for you?
Yeah, we're pretty happy here on the U.S. market. Although we're in Dubai right now, the Guytex, a couple of our guys are in the Asian market, just because just as I said, you can't just solve the problem by solving one piece of it. You have to solve the whole thing. Our real goal here is to solve a problem, regardless of the geography. So we've got a technology that can make a difference, that can make somebody more secure, and we've put it into a format that allows the vendors as well as the enterprise to not have to spend 3 months gathering enough money to afford it. It's done at a consumption model. So we're globally growing, and that's going to continue. And here our next big release I'm super excited about, and we kind of learned this lesson from Wiz, is these knowledge graphs. The ability to kind of look at a knowledge graph in the way it somehow or another connects to you as a human, to be able to go through those patterns. I think we're this month releasing a lot of our previous reports are now going to be in knowledge graphs, mainly because of their effectiveness. So we're going to continue to invest in this technology that makes it more effective, and following what we hear from communities such as yours, channel program. We listen a lot, and everything we've done in the last 2 years has been because somebody said, "Hey, you guys, this would be great." We're talking to Zscaler, and they gave us some ideas. They're like, "You guys got to be able to do this," and we spent like 60 days doing it because it wasn't in the industry. And so we do several things that just honestly nobody else has, and it's because of the feedback we get, and we certainly encourage it. Anybody has ideas, anybody who wants to take a look at how we go about it and come up with any ideas of how to make it better, we're all ears. Most of our feedback comes from our MSPs, because they're the front line.
Absolutely.
And they've got the pressure's there, right? I mean, you're doing MSP or MSSP, it doesn't matter. If you're an MSP, you've been by demand kind of encouraged to offer security products. There's nobody who doesn't have some security component today, regardless. So yeah, so we hear a lot of that. We're looking for the direction and where we're most effective.
Yeah. So it's it being Cybersecurity Month, I guess, what's the best way to reach out to you guys and connect and learn more?
Yeah, go to our website, RiskProfiler.io. That's the best place. In fact, we use that site for gathering information, as well as it's the onboard for going to RiskProfiler. So visit us there. Love to give demos. We've got some little explainer videos we sent out through Walnut, which we're big fans of. And especially when you get to the point that you want to offer a tool that is effective, it's deep and wide, and at the same time do it in a way that it's a cash flow positive environment where you're actually making enough to service it. There's more to software than just running it, right? You've got to be able to provide the customer with a remediation and things like that, and you need that visibility. So we have all of that. So go to riskprofiler.io and let us know. We'd love to give you a demo.
Yes, definitely do that, because as I mentioned, these guys are moving fast, and the way they've architected and what they've built, I'm a big fan. So I think it's definitely worth the time checking them out, and let us know how it goes, because I think you guys are really solving a tremendous need in this space, and the way you guys have architected it, and just that onboarding path, I think it's slick, and so I encourage everybody to check it out.
Yeah. And one last thing, since we only have a couple of seconds left, the value of going to channel program, that community, and I've tried to talk on it as we went through the whole presentation here today, is incredibly powerful. So come out to channel program and talk to us there too, either direction. But having that community is a game changer for, I think, the industry in general. Used to be you were always on your own and you couldn't talk frankly, but once you've formed a community, you can spend some time and learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah. Well, you're a true gentleman for mentioning us. I appreciate that. But
Yeah,
so we'll have links in the show notes, and again, encourage everybody to check RiskProfiler out, and follow Gary out there on all those social platforms, LinkedIn and whatnot. And Gary, we'll see you very soon. I imagine at an event, some event, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty busy with events.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd be up in the Maryland area. I still have a home in Maryland, so love it up there.
Awesome. Well, we'll be up here next time. Let's definitely connect. So
Okay, great. Fantastic.
cool.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks everybody for attending.